Hi, good morning everybody. This is Nicholas Teo here in Singapore at CMC Markets. A few things to highlight today. It was actually a lot of action last night on the currency front, namely the US dollar. The dollar index saw a certain amount of strength all across, and this is on the back of some hawkish tone coming up from one of the Fed governors that suggests that he is actually seeing two rate hikes this year. One or the first being in September, the subsequent to be followed presumably in December. Now this is perhaps a slightly different tone than what we saw from Mrs. Yellen last week when she came up on the back of the previous FOMC. Nonetheless, markets reacted in a big way, and the euro dollar, for one thing, saw one of the bigger moves in terms of the pairs or the major pairs that we follow. Let me just pull this euro dollar. I've got these two things linked. Okay. Now we're seeing let me just remove this. We're seeing a daily chart of the euro dollar here, and we saw this big move or this big sell down yesterday. Admittedly, a lot of it had to do with Greece in the early part of the day, but it went on an accelerated dive on the back of the Fed statement or the Fed governor statement last night. It's managed to hold its 50-day moving average at around here, the 111.2 sort of levels. And this morning we are sort of consolidating that big move down. There are a lot of players out there which suggest that we may still see this thing being pressed further down, but for the time being, the 50-day moving average seems to be some sort of a support for the stock. We've seen this sort of down channel from last December sort of broken by this series of perhaps moves up, but it's still early days, and there are so many news or so many different news and motivation that could actually give this pair a direction. Likewise, I mean, from a 50-minute chart, you saw this first move come in from a bit of rhetoric from Greece, and then later on this bigger move coming from the Fed chairman, or rather not the Fed chairman, but the Governor Powell. Now, yesterday we saw also the mid-month PMI announcements or reports coming from various regions, beginning from China, going into Europe. US will report theirs, I think, tomorrow evening. If I can just reconfirm that, yes, tomorrow in the evening at 9:45. But the key trend here has been that most of these major economies, namely those of China and the majors in the Europe region or the European region, namely Germany and also France, reported better than expected PMIs. Now, this is one of the first few times we've seen for a long while a broad-based sort of improvement, suggesting that perhaps demand-supply indicators may now take the charge in terms of a lot of plays, namely commodities. For example, copper that we have over here. If I just want to pull this up again. Okay, this is let me just pull up the daily chart first. We saw a huge bounce on the back of that. Now, admittedly, this bounce has come on the back of a whole a sell down since the beginning of, or rather the middle of May or so. For the longest time, the CRB or the commodities index have been plagued by weaker demands. Now, certain commodities have managed to actually hold firmer due to a pullback in supply, like we saw in oil, for example. But for the very much part of it, we are seeing the CRB sort of flattening out in the last 3-4 months, where we have had no indication of growth per se. Now, this first sign perhaps may breathe some life into commodity plays once more. Copper saw this first move from the PMIs. And if I just pull up the 50-minute chart here, we saw another bigger move come in late in the day last night when the US announced their housing starts numbers, which clearly suggests a firmer number than what the market expected. So we're starting to see growth indicators come in, and I think this is something which is actually quite important because for the long while, a lot of commodity plays have been more or less motivated by a pullback in supply, like in the case of oil, for example. But this time round, the demand side of the equation is starting to actually hold its own, and going further on, I think we may see something. We may see a continual of that. Finally, just one stock on the Singapore front, SATS, SETS. SETS announced this morning before the market that their subsidiary in Japan announced a huge contract with Delta Airlines. That contract is valued around 300 million or so. Now, essentially, it caused a pop in the stock at the open down here. But nonetheless, I just wanted to flag this shooting star pattern that we saw here at the end of a series of actually climb since the beginning of, or rather since the middle of May once more. A shooting star normally is a reversal pattern. And this reversal pattern will be more or less complete if we see a break of this low down here, of the low yesterday of around the 348, 349 sort of levels. It's still very early on in the day, and we are starting to see the stock settle at this level. But obviously, if this stock today manages to pull above the 354 high of yesterday, then all bets are off where this where the shooting star is concerned. It's something to just indicate to everybody, just to point out, and possibly something that we can follow through later with more news or flow. Thank you very much.